day after tomorrow is because it's a public holiday. So Wednesday is a holiday, so we'll not have class. So our next class will held on Monday, 19th April. Okay. All right. So I'm sharing my screen. Entire screen. So can you see the screen now?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay, okay. All right. So as I said, I'll be sharing the presentation after the class, so you can just take a look at whatever we have discussed so far. So things are quite simple, but maybe you, for this type of subject or for these type of topics, it's better if you make some notes, some very short notes, just to classify things and just to write the important terms that will help you a lot in understanding the contents. If you take a look at the if you now take a look at the course, the syllabus, then you can see that we have actually more or less we have covered these two units. So we have covered definition and characteristics and types of engineering research, right? All these things we have covered. Research formulation, so defining and formulating the research problem, selecting the problem, necessity of defining the problem, literature survey, significance of defining a problem, various sources, critical review, identifying gap areas from literature review and research database, and development of working hypothesis. So most of these things we have already covered. Some of these things we have not covered, but we will be covering that. And we are currently at the third unit. Okay, means it's all actually overlapped. So in the third one, the research design, basic principles, need of research design, features of a research design, important concepts relating to research design, observation and facts, laws and theory. So we are actually covering these things, and some of these things we have not yet covered, such as the role of ICT in research, okay, research ethics and IPR. Also IPR and everything, these things we will cover after uh, a few classes. Okay. So we in the last class, where were we? So in the last class, we started this research design actually, and we discussed the meaning of research design. What's the meaning of research design? And we discussed about the sampling design, and very briefly actually we discussed the observational design. These are some ways in which we can classify it. We then discuss about the need of research design. We discuss about features of a good design. We discuss about the important concepts relating to research design. So yeah, so we were discussing actually these things. So these terms are there. So dependent and independent variables. So before describing the different research designs, it will be appropriate to explain the various concepts relating to design, that so that these may be better and easily understood. So basically, there are a couple of ways of classifying the research design, and what exactly research design and how we classify depending on different types of studies. So we will see that, but before that we were discussing these terms. All right. So dependent and independent variable, extraneous variable, control, confounded relationship. So I think we were somewhere here in between control and confounded relationships. So I'll be quickly reviewing it, only this part. So dependent and independent variables, so we had seen that anything which can actually take a quantitative value, which can be presented in numbers, can be termed as a variable. Okay, so variable can be a continuous variable or it can be a discrete variable. So for example, age, so age is a continuous variable, right? Because you can present it in terms of after the decimal points also. It need not to be an integer value, but it you can present in terms of decimal points. So 5 points after the decimal, or 10 points after the decimal. So those things are called the continuous variables. Okay. The next is a discrete variables, where which can actually just be presented in terms of integer values. It has to be uh, mm, uh, you should not mention it in terms of decimal points. For example, number of children. So it can be either 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, but it cannot be 2.5 or 3.5, something like this. In the same way, whenever you are counting something, then mostly all those things are actually discrete variables. If I say that how many chairs are in this room, and you say that like 25 chairs, so it is either 25 or 26 or whatever number of chairs are there, but it cannot be like 25.369 chairs. Maybe it can be average of something, or it can take some other value. But if you are just counting the things, then it is a discrete variable. And if you can present in terms of points, then it is a continuous variable. For example, pressure, temperature, all those things we represent in terms of points. So they all are decimal points. So they all are actually your continuous variables. Another thing that we discussed was the qualitative phenomena. So some of the things which have some attributes or some characteristics which are basically the qualitative things, uh, they can also be quantified on the basis of the presence or absence of the concerning attributes. Okay, so they can also be represented in some kind of numbers. Now a very good example of this is such as colors. Okay, so I cannot just it is very difficult to define colors in numbers, but we have done that, right? Because if I just say that what color is this, so you know that this is a blue color, this is a black color, this is a brown color, but you cannot just present it in terms of numbers. But we have means we have actually we present the colors or the characteristics of colors in different numbers, such as if I just I mean, this is something that you know, but if I just open this paint and if I just go to the edit colors, then you can see that by this hue and saturation and the lightness or the illumination, uh, with these variables actually we can present the colors in this RGB format, the red, green, blue color format, right? So all these are presented in terms of numbers. So these characteristics of colors can be also be quantified actually. The purpose of showing this is just this. So the qualitative phenomena can also be presented in terms of quantities. So, okay, so continuous variable, discrete variables, but our main concern was the dependent and independent variable. So the dependent variable, if one variable depends upon the consequence of the other variable, it is termed as the dependent variable. But if it doesn't depend, then it is termed as the independent variable. So independent variable is anything which you change, and dependent variable is something which is changed because of this independent variable. Okay, so we had seen a very nice example that suppose you have this three plants are there. So what you can do, you can change the amount of water you are giving to these plants. Okay, and so this becomes your independent variable. Okay, this is something that you are changing, and then the independent so this is the independent variable, and the dependent variable, which is it is a variable which is affected by the change, such as the size of the plant or number of leaves, or they are living or dead. So these things are the the output of this amount of water. So amount of water is your independent variable, and all these terms are your dependent variable. And similarly, I discussed that if you are changing the um, uh, velocity, then your flow rate will change, or if you change the flow rate, then your velocity will change. So in case whatever you are changing, that becomes the independent variable, and the thing which is changed is the dependent variable. Okay, so we discussed this actually. Then we were discussing about the extraneous variables. So extraneous variables are the variables which are not the independent variable, but they have impact on the dependent variable, okay, in some ways, and they are undesired variables. They are something which we don't want. So for example, this is the independent variable and this is a dependent variable. So we want to know if the independent variable affects the dependent variable in some way. Okay, if it is, if I'm changing something and the output, as an output something is changing, but there are some other factors. Basically these are some factors, and there are some other factors because of which also the dependent variable will change. Okay, so those factors or those variables are called the extraneous variables. So we are not interested in extraneous variables. They are undesired variables, but they affect the dependent variable in some way. So we had seen a number of extraneous variables. So extraneous variables are all variables which are not the independent variable, but they affect the dependent variable, or they affect the result of the experiments. So for example, situational variables. So if you are performing some experiment and suppose the light is not good, then it is possible that uh, you cannot read your dial properly, right? If you have dial gauge, something pressure gauge is there, and if the light is not proper, then it is possible that cannot read it. But it doesn't mean that it is showing you the incorrect value, but you are reading the incorrect value. So that is a kind of something which is extraneous variable. So lighting conditions are there, temperatures are there, noise is there. So if some areas are very warm or very hot, so it will be difficult to work there for extended period of time or for a long time. If I say that perform 5 experiments, then maybe the first experiment you will perform very happily, but in the successive experiments you will actually lose your efficiency because of the temperature. So those things are called the situational variables. The second thing is the participant or the person variable. So in the participant or person variable, it refers to the ways in which the participant varies from the other. So it actually includes the mood and intelligence and anxiety and nerves and concentration, etc. So you should take proper rest, proper food. Okay, then only you can do your experiments or any study or any research basically. Experimental or investigator effects. So I think these things also we discussed in the last class, but I'm just reviewing it. So the experimenter unconsciously conveys the participant how they should behave, okay, how the experiment should behave, or how the participant should behave, or what is some kind of expectation that is there in the experimenter's mind. So all those things are also the factors. So they are also extraneous variables, and this is called the experimenter bias. Okay, the next is the demand characteristic. Demand characteristics means what is actually expected from the experiment. So as I think I gave you an example that uh, if somewhere you see that the relation between two variables is linear. So if I say that x and y variables are there, and you are even seeing this kind of trend, and still you can just say कि नहीं नहीं वो तो linear है तो it should feel actually a straight line. Okay, but rather it is not filling a straight line, it is a non-linear behavior in actual thing. But you can be influenced by the demand characteristics. That means what is the demand, what is the expected output. Okay, so what is the purpose of the research, why you are doing that research, and what is the expectation from your research. So that can also affect your output. So participant will be affected by their surroundings, the researcher's characteristic, the researcher's behavior, non-verbal communication, and the interpretation of what is going on in the situation. So non-verbal communication, such as we somehow we communicate in this way, such as if you are not doing if your one point, if all your points are like this, but your one point is something like this, then most people will think that this point is actually an error. Okay, because all the points are falling on a straight line, but this point is behaving actually very, in a weird way. But it is possible that this is how you are getting the result, and maybe this can bring you to a new idea or a new concept, this particular point. But if you are just ignoring it just because someone is saying that no, it should follow the linear thing. So all those things are there, and the interpretation of what is going on in the situation, that how you interpret things, how you see things, all these things are actually comes under the extraneous variables. The next is a control. So control, that means you want to control the effects of extraneous variables. So one important characteristics of a good research design is to minimize the influence or effect of the extraneous variable. So the term control is used for same way, for this way, that how you can control the extraneous variables. And you can, just by looking at this slide, you can see most of the things, such as for example noise is there, temperature is there, lighting conditions. So you can control these things. You can make the uh, your experimental area in the range of thermal comfort. You can take care of the noise. There should not be any background noise, there should not be any uh, other type of noise. And if your experiment is very sensitive, then you have to actually very well, you have to control the external noise because in very sensitive experiments, even the small noise can bring vibrations and others. So all these things you can control. Lighting conditions, so properly it should be illuminated, so your light should be proper. For controlling the participant or person variable, all these things you should make sure that at least the participant is not nervous or not anxious or has taken and you also, I mean, as an experimenter, you should also take good rest before doing any uh, experiments. You should not convey anything to your participant or to anyone else who is doing the experiment. If you are just doing experiment, then you have to be very neutral to the observations. You just have to observe the results or the observations that what you are getting. So such as in this case, if you are getting this point, then the thing is that for doing experiments, actually you have to repeat it a number of times, and if every time you are getting this point, then that means this point is not an error. Okay, suppose you are doing experiment 5 times, and only one time you got this, but then it is difficult to get again this point which is beyond this linear trend. Okay, if you got this once, then you can say that this can be some kind of error because you have repeated the experiment 5 times or 10 times, the same experiment, keeping every all the other parameters the same. If you have repeated that experiment several times and only once you got this, then it can be considered as an error. But if out of 5 times, if you 4 times, if you are getting this point, then this is definitely not an error. So you have to be neutral about this. You should not be biased, and you should not pay attention to the demand characteristics, what is expected or what your so this actually happens in mostly in industrial research. So we get some idea and then we assume that okay, so this is what we want, and your experiments or your results should actually show the same thing that you want. Okay, but you have to be neutral in this case also. So this is the meaning of the control. So in experimental research, the term control is used to refer to restrain experimental conditions or to minimize the effects of extraneous variable. Confounded relationship. So this is the next term that you should be familiar with. So confounded relationship means, so if you take a look at the meaning of confound, so confound means which can cause surprise or confusion in someone's mind, especially by not according with their expectation. Okay, so suppose you are expecting something and the result is not as per your expectation, then it means that there is some kind of mix up, okay, with mixing of something with something else. So in this case, the relationship between your independent and dependent variable is called a confounded relationship. So when the dependent variable is not free from the influence of extraneous variables, then the relationship between the dependent and independent variable is said to be confounded by an extraneous variable. Okay, so that means if your extraneous variable, if you are unable to remove this effect and these variables are affecting your result all the time, then you say that your the relation between the dependent and independent variable is a confounded relationship. Okay, even if you are trying to eliminate the effect, but still if you cannot do. So for example, if I just give you a very simple, suppose you have well developed theory on what should be the maximum velocity at the center line of a pipe. Okay, if you are flowing the water at say 2 lpm. So for 2 lpm, if you are getting the correct value as per your standard theory, and for 4 lpm you are not getting the correct value, okay, then you say that for 4 lpm, your relationship between the flow rate and the velocity is a confounded relationship because you are not getting the values as per your theory, or as per means you have to make sure that ideally you should get that value, and not I mean, you should not get confused with the fact that at 4 lpm the theory, uh, it is possible that the theory doesn't hold, or the theory is not valid at 4 lpm, right? So you have to actually take care of all these things. But if you see that your theory is valid and you are not getting the expected value, then your relationship between the flow rate and the velocity is a confounded relationship. That means it is affected by some kind of other things which are not part of your direct independent variable. The next is the research hypothesis. So research hypothesis, when a prediction or a hypothesized relationship is to be tested by scientific method, it is termed as research hypothesis. So hypothesis actually means anything which is a proposed explanation of something, and then that proposed explanation you have to check with the with suitable research. Okay, so with the experiments or with the simulation, with some kind of methods, you have to check your proposed explanation. So that is called the hypothesis. So the research hypothesis is a predictive statement that relates an independent variable to a dependent variable. Okay, so if you are saying that, for example, in the flow problem, if you are saying that the flow rate is changing the velocity, okay, then you can check this, uh, which is in for us it is obvious that if you increase the flow rate, the velocity or the center line will increase, but you have to check it that by what amount it is changing, what is the relationship between the independent and dependent variable, between the flow rate and the velocity. So all these things you have to check. And then if so, I mean, hypotheses are actually not this simple, but if you have very well formulated your hypothesis, then you can actually explicitly check particularly that hypothesis. So usually a research hypothesis must contain at least one independent and one dependent variable, right? So something, so independent variable, that means something that you are changing, and dependent variable, which is something which is being changed because of your input, because of your independent variable. Uh, Another thing, what is not a hypothesis? So a hypothesis is not something which cannot be actually tested. Okay, so if you cannot test something, then that is actually not the hypothesis. So if you are just saying something, you don't have any uh, arrangement or any method to test that, then it is not a hypothesis. So predictive statements. Okay, if you are just saying that, see, if I do this, then this will happen. Okay, but if you cannot verify it, uh, it cannot be objectively verified, or the relationships that are assumed. Okay, if you are assuming something but it cannot be tested, then they are not the research hypothesis. So if you have some kind of assumption, then it is obviously not a hypothesis. So hypothesis should always be uh, tested and verified. So this is the research hypothesis. The next is the experimental and non-experimental hypothesis testing research. So whenever you are testing any hypothesis, then it is called a hypothesis testing research. It can be experimental or it can be non-experimental. It can actually be a combination of these two. So in the experimental and non-experimental hypothesis testing research, so this is actually very interesting. So in the research in which the independent variable is manipulated, okay, in any kind of study where the independent variable is manipulated is termed as experimental hypothesis. And if you are not manipulating the independent variable, then it is called the non-experimental hypothesis. Okay, so uh, for example, if I just give you the example of our flow rate and velocity thing, then if I am deliberately changing the flow rate, okay, and I have kept the specific conditions of this pipe diameter and everything, then this is actually a experimental hypothesis testing research, because I am changing the flow rate from 2 lpm to 3 liter per minute to 4 liter per minute, okay, whatever I'm doing. And similarly, you can take examples from other streams of engineering. So if you are changing something explicitly, you are changing the independent variable, then it is called the experimental hypothesis testing research. There are some research which are non-experimental hypothesis testing research. Mostly they are studied in some kind of behavioral studies. So some one example is here. I'll try to explain this example. Now suppose someone wants to check whether intelligence affects the reading ability. Okay, so uh, this is a kind of study which can be conducted in HSS department, that whether intelligence affects the reading ability. So there are some ways in which you can, try and quantify the intelligence of someone. So you can do some kind of test, uh, some kind of questionnaire or something, and then you can see that how intelligent a person is. So such as this is how we do this IQ testing, right? So that is the intelligence testing thing. And then the reading ability is something which is something if you just give them a piece of paper and you just ask them to read, right? So whether these two things are related or not. Now if I just go in a class, or if I just go in a population, and if I randomly select suppose 50 students, okay, and I just test their intelligence and their reading ability by some methods, by calculating the coefficient of correlation. So this is a non-experimental hypothesis testing research, okay, because the independent variable, which is the intelligence, is not manipulated. So if you just go to any population, if you randomly select 50 student, if you just go to a class, if you randomly select like 50 students, and then you do some kind of research, then that is a non-experimental hypothesis testing research, because you have not done anything with the population or with the independent variable. But if you select those 50 students, okay, and if you divide them into two batches of 25 and 25, and you say that this 25 students will do some course which is a general course, and these 25 students will do some course which is a special course, okay, on any particular say reading ability course, or the or if you are just manipulating the, basically if you want to manipulate the intelligence, then if you just give them some kind of course where they can improve their IQ, for example. So for these 25 you do a basic course, and for these 25 you do an advanced course. So in this case, after this, if you just do the same study and if you check their reading ability, then that can be termed as an experimental study, right? Because you have manipulated the students, you have actually manipulated the way in which you have taken the number of student, or the these batches. So if the group A is there and the group B is there, and you have put the group A to a usual study program and group B to a special studies program, and at the end of the course you are doing some kind of a study, then that is actually the experimental hypothesis testing research, because in this case the independent variable, that is the type of training program, is manipulated, because to one you have given the um, general general study program, and to other you have given the special studies program. So it is something like you have trained someone and you have not trained someone. Okay, so if you are selecting from a random population, then you don't know, then they can be actually trained or they cannot be trained, or it is very random, so it is non experimental. But if you have trained someone and if you have not trained someone and then you are doing some research, then it is an experimental hypothesis testing research. The next is the experimental and control group. So in the experimental hypothesis testing research, when a group is exposed to usual conditions, it is a control group. So for example, in the previous case, the group A was a control group, okay, where you put them to the usual studies program. But if you have exposed to some novel or special conditions, then it is termed as experimental group. Okay, so in that it is an experimental group. So in the previous example, group A is the control group and group B is experimental group. If you put both the groups to the special studies program, then both groups will be experimental group. If you don't put anyone, then both the groups will be the control groups. So it is possible to design studies which include only experimental groups, or studies which include both experimental and control groups. Okay, so experimental and control groups are these, where you have put some under some special condition, then it is experimental group. If you have not put under any special condition, then it is called the control group. These are just names. The next is treatment. So treatment is something which you do with your independent variable. So in case if you have a control group, then if you are just doing some kind of treatment with this control group, that means you are making them an experimental group, then something that you do with this control group is called the treatment. So for example, in this case, if you had just put this group A, which was actually a control group, and group B, which was also a control group initially, but you put this group B into the special studies program, right? So you made it the experimental group. So you put this special studies program. So this special studies program is actually your treatment. to group B. Okay, so this is something that you have done with the group B. So the treatment is the different conditions under which experimental and control groups are put and are usually referred to as treatments. So the different conditions under which you put these groups are referred as treatments. So in the previous example, the two treatments are the usual studies program and the special studies program. Okay, in the group A you have put in the usual study program, and group B you have put in the special studies program. So these are the treatments that you have done with them. So yeah, so for example, let us take another example. So if you want to determine through an experiment the comparative impact of three varieties of fertilizers on a yield of a wheat. Okay, in this case, the three variant of fertilizer will be treated as three treatments. Okay, so what does it mean? So if you want to study any crop, and if you want to see that you are growing wheat in this crop, and if you want to see that how much wheat is being produced by using any special kind of fertilizer, okay, any special fertilizer. So if you are using, if you have kept everything the same, the type of the wheat the same, the area is same, everything is the same amount of water and the climate conditions, weather, everything is the same, but you have just used kind of fertilizer, say A fertilizer in this field, B fertilizer in this field, and C fertilizer in this field. So these use of these fertilizers can be considered as a treatment. Okay, so the way you are uh, changing the variable, and then you want to see that what is the output of this thing. So in that case, the three varieties of the fertilizers will be treated as three treatments. Okay, so this is a treatment A, this is treatment B, and this is treatment C. So this is something that you do with the experimental and control groups. They are called the treatments. The next is the experiment. So experiment is something which uh, in general terms, it is something which is used to examine the truth of a statistical hypothesis relating to some problem. So for example, we can conduct an experiment to examine the usefulness of a certain newly developed fertilizer in the yield of a crop. Okay, so if I go back to our previous case, then you have seen that A, B, and C, these are the fertilizers that we have used. These are the different treatments that we have done to these crops. But if I produce a new fertilizer which is D, and if I want to see the effectiveness of this fertilizer, then I can instead of in another field, I can use this D fertilizer and I can see the effect of this. So this will be an experiment. Okay, maybe the crop will grow faster or better, maybe it will be destroyed completely. Okay, we don't know. So that is something that you are doing with this uh, crop by using a new type of fertilizer. So this is the experiment actually, and all these things are actually experiment. So experiments can be further classified as absolute experiment or comparative experiment. So if you just want to study the effect of this fertilizer D on the crop, then this is absolute experiment. Okay, just in terms of some parameters you can present your result. But if you want to see that which one is better, okay, then you have to do for A and B and C and D, and then you compare the D with the others, and this is how we actually plot the graphs, right? So we see that this is how the A is behaving, this is B is behaving, this is C is behaving, and this is how the D is behaving. So D may appear a better fertilizer, or this is how the D is behaving. Okay, so it may not be that good fertilizer. So if you are comparing this with the ABC, then it is a comparative research. So let us see that, for example, we can conduct an experiment to examine the usefulness of a certain newly developed fertilizer in the yield of a crop. So experiment can be of two types: absolute experiment and comparative experiment. If you want to determine the impact of a fertilizer on the yield of a crop, it is a case of absolute experiment. But if you want to determine the impact of one fertilizer as compared to the impact of some other fertilizer, then our experiment will be termed as comparative experiment, right? So these terms are actually quite simple. So often we undertake comparative experiments when we talk about design of experiments. Okay, so we will see this design of experiments in some details, and we mostly do this comparative experiments because then only we can say something about the research. Because absolute experiment is something which is done for the first time, right? But Comparative experiment is something which can be which is done to compare whether it is good or bad. If it is good, then how good. If it is bad, then how bad it is. For example, now we have number of corona vaccines, okay, and a number of new vaccines are coming into market in next few months. So then you can compare with the population. There are some kind of studies that must be going on, that which is having what type of impact. And the last is experimental units. So this is where you perform your treatments. Okay, so these are called the experimental units. So the predetermined plots or the blocks where different treatments are used are known as experimental units. So how you are actually performing those treatments, that is actually very important, because it should not create some other variable in your experiment. So if I'm just changing the flow rate, and if my flow meter is not correct, or if my control valve is not correct with which I'm controlling the flow rate, then all these experiments will actually will not have any significant values. Because if I'm reading that it is 3 lpm, but actually it is going as 4 lpm, then it is not, or 3.2 lpm, then it is not a correct, uh, we will not get the correct output. So with this, I think we have covered the important concepts relating to research design. So all these things we have discussed. If you now take a look at this slide, then we have discussed actually the independent and dependent variable, extraneous variables, control, confounded relationship, research hypothesis, experimental and non-experimental hypothesis testing research, experimental and control groups, treatments, experimental units. Okay, so all these things we have actually covered. Now the next part is the different research designs. So actually in the next class we will be starting about the experimental research designs. So today we will see that what are the different types of research designs. So research designs can be classified in three categories. One is for the exploratory research, one is for the descriptive research, and the third is for the hypothesis testing research. So in the exploratory research, exploratory or formulative research, the main thing is that you have to survey the literature, and you have to do the experience survey, and you have to analyze of insight stimulating examples. So we'll see these things. And the next is the research design in case of descriptive and diagnostic research studies. And the last one, the third one, is the research design in case of hypothesis testing research studies. So most of the time we actually perform this hypothesis testing research studies, and we do this experimentally most of the time. And basically, if I just compare these two, then most of the time we do this descriptive study, because we just want to have more and more idea of the activity that is happening in any experiment. Okay, so we will see this. So the first is research design in case of exploratory research studies. So exploratory or formulative research studies, so in which the purpose is to uh, formulate a problem for more precise investigation, or for developing a working hypothesis from an operational point of view. So in this case, basically you are exploring something. You want to develop a new theory, or you want to develop a new equation, or you want to do something new. Then in that case, you want to explore something, you want to explore some phenomena, then you have to be very flexible. That is the first thing, is that you have to be very flexible. You have to open your mind to all the possibilities that may happen. Okay, it is possible that whatever you are thinking may or may not happen, but you have to take care, you have to actually broaden your perspective. Okay, you have to think that it may happen because of this, it may happen because of this, all the things. Most of the time you have to actually think out of the box also, right? So that is something which is important in the exploratory or formulative research studies. So when you are formulating something, or you are exploring something, then you have to be very much flexible in absorbing the ideas, or absorbing the thoughts, or absorbing the observations. So the three methods are done for this kind of study. For example, The first is let us first see the three methods. So first method is a survey of concerning literature. Okay, so in the literature survey, that is a very important thing. If you want to explore something, then you have to have the idea of origin of that problem, whatever work has been done so far, what are the different assumptions or hypotheses, what are the different methods or results or observations, whatever has been done in your particular uh, area, then that everything you should do a very thorough study, and you should do it with very open mind. Okay, so then only actually you can do this exploratory or formulative research. So hypothesis is stated by earlier workers or earlier researchers that you should review, and that you should also review that whether they are valid for their special cases or they are valid for general cases. But what are the other hypotheses that other researchers have presented in their studies? So all these things you can get from the literature survey. Whether the proposed hypothesis is useful for for your further research. Okay, so all these things. Bibliographic survey, this is another important term in this literature survey. So in this, what you do, you just look at the different references of all your important papers, and then you go to those specific papers where you want to explore further. You also explore that already stated hypothesis. What are the already stated hypotheses? You also suggest new hypotheses. So all these things you can get from the literature survey. So this is a literature survey is actually a very detailed and thorough process in this, because you are exploring something, some equations or some phenomena or something you want to, formulating something. The next can be the experience survey. So experience survey is something where you talk to the people who are working in your research area, or the problem that you want to study. So you talk to the people who are actually working. That means they are the experienced people. They have spent their life in that particular area. So okay, so there are scientists who spend their life in such as if you're doing something in your computational fluid dynamics, then you can actually talk to the very well established researchers in that CFD area, such as Patankar, or maybe he may not be accessible, but all the other experienced persons who have worked in CFD for like 30 years or 40 years. So you can talk to them and you can get a lot of ideas from them, and you can discuss your hypothesis or your literature or about the problem. Even if you meet them for a short time, then they will give you a lot of idea. That is called the experience survey. The third is the analysis of insight stimulating examples. Okay, so insight stimulating examples, that means anything which can actually give you some new paths. You might have seen that if you are stuck in something, then if you just change your mood, or if you go out, or if you take a shower, or if you go on a walk, then you will get some new ideas of that problem. Okay, so these are actually not the thing that that are included, that going on a walk or taking a nap, but insight stimulating examples, that means observing something from a new angle, or observing something, some phenomena which is you want to study again and again, and thinking about it, continuously thinking about it, and relating multiple things with each other. So if you can do that, then that is actually a very good thing for the exploratory or formulative research. So it is something where you want to develop something new. So you have to take a look at the literature, you have to discuss with the people who are experienced, and you have to also look for the insight stimulating examples. If you want to study the behavioral aspects of someone or a population, then you can take a look at the reaction of strangers. Okay, the study of individuals who are in transition from one stage to another, the reaction of individuals from different social strata, and similar. So in this case, if you are in transition from one stage to another, then a lot of things will change. If you are studying, and if you got a job, then a number of things will change in your life. So people can talk to you and they can learn about how you felt, or what are your feedbacks, or what are your observations from this change. Okay, if you get married, then again some new responsibilities will come. So all these things are, just examples. So these are just examples, but scientifically or in engineering problems, you can again think of something very similar. You might have you know you might be knowing this by now, that a lot of things are there which we don't know, and once we know about them, then we become more and more interested in that, in any scientific problem. A lot of instruments are there, a lot of uh, analysis methods are there, a lot of things are there which actually you will know only when you start doing that thing. If you're doing any experiment, then you will uh, come a problem, and then you will see, oh, this problem has been faced by a number of people already, and they have used this technique. So those things are the insight stimulating examples. So this is about the exploratory or formulative research. The next is about the descriptive or diagnostic research. So in the descriptive research, basically the research that we do typically, that is called the descriptive research. So this is about trying to get more and more features and more information on some phenomena that is happening. So which are concerned with the describing the characteristics of a particular individual or a group. Okay, so the design of these studies must be rigid and not flexible, and must focus attention on the following. So another thing is that when you are doing any descriptive research, okay, then your design should be rigid. In case of exploratory research, your design should be flexible. Okay, this is the main difference actually, and with this you can understand the other differences. So in this case, design should be rigid. What is the meaning of rigid design? Rigid design, that means you have to be very specific to what you want to study. So for example, if I want to study a pipe flow, then I have to be specific that what is the pipe diameter, okay, what is a flow rate, what is the range of flow rate that I can work on this, what are the properties of the fluid that is flowing, what is the how I'm measuring the flow rate, what is the uh, how I'm measuring the pressure in this, if I'm measuring. So all these things have to be very specific, and if you you know uh, keep your specific things together, then it becomes a rigid design. Okay, you don't have flexibility, you cannot simply change the size of a pipe, okay, because all other things will change. So if your all the fittings and everything will change, you cannot simply change the flow rate beyond a limit, right? Because your system is not designed for that. So you have to be rigid in these cases. So you have to uh, read the related literature, and then you have to design your experiments. So in the descriptive studies, the design is rigid and not flexible. So you have to focus on these things. So first thing is the formulating the objective of the study. What is, why do you want to perform this study, what are the applications, why you are doing what is the motivation. So this is to ensure the data collection are relevant. The next is the designing the method of data collection, what techniques are there. So whatever we have discussed actually in the initial stage, they come under the descriptive study. So what are the techniques to gather the data? So whether you will be doing some experimental observation or questionnaire or interviewing or examination of records, what how will you collect the data? How will you select the sample? Okay, how much material will be needed? Or if it's a population, then how will you select the sample? There are different ways of selecting a sample. Actually, we will see that also. How will you collect the data? Okay, where the data be required, required data can be found, and what time period should the data be related. So all those things you have to, whatever we have discussed in the initial research methodology class, all these things are actually the part of your descriptive research. How will you process that data, how will you analyze the data, and how will you report the findings? So all these things are descriptive studies. So we actually perform the descriptive studies, uh, whether it is by simulation or experiments or other ways. If I just compare these two, then the research design uh, and the type of study. So overall design for the exploratory research, it should be flexible, because you should have the opportunity for considering different aspects of the problem and the different views and the different hypotheses. So you should be very flexible. You should be ready to adopt and accept a number of things. In the descriptive study, descriptive design, you have to be, means the design is rigid, because design must take enough provision for protection against bias and must maximize the reliability. Okay, so you should not you should actually maximize your reliability, and you should not be biased to anything. So it is a rigid design. If I just further classify, then the sampling design, so it's a non-probability sampling design. So we'll see what is a probability and non-probability sampling design. But if it is a non-probability sampling design, that means the it's a actually judgment sampling. You have to non-probability sampling design, that means you are selecting the samples specifically. Okay, and a descriptive design, it should be random sampling. That means you have to just select your sample randomly, and that should give you the idea. So we will see what is the difference between this probability and non-probability sampling designs. Statistical design. So in the statistical design, no pre-planned design for analysis. In this case, we have pre-planned design of analysis. Basically, we uh, we plan a lot of things, and then we do the research. Then we do this descriptive research. And if here we cannot plan, because we are formulating something new or we are exploring something new. Observation design. So unstructured instrument for collection of data. Right. You have to be flexible in all these aspects. In this case, it is a structured or well thought of instrument for collection the data. You have to be rigid in all these aspects. Operational design. So no fixed decision about the operational procedure here. All the decisions are fixed. Advanced decision about the operational procedure, how will you collect the data, how will you analyze the data, everything is fixed. So that is a descriptive design. If you are very flexible, then that is a formulative design. Okay, so I think we can stop here, because we are already at 5:30. But the next thing is the third one, which is the hypothesis testing research studies. And in this case, basically, it is studies in the design of experiments. So we'll see in the next class that what are the design of experiments, basic principles of experimental design, and then we will also see some other in the experimental design, we'll see some more details. So next few classes might be a bit interesting. So if you have anything to ask in this, you can ask. I'll be sharing this presentation right after this class. Do you have anything to say? Are you basically getting these things? I mean, it may look like a descriptive or theoretical subject, but some parts are quite interesting, and there is a lot to take home from this course. Okay, so I'm presenting. Okay, so if you don't have anything to ask, then uh, I think we can stop now, and I'll be sharing this presentation right now, and we will meet next Monday. We will not have class this Wednesday, because this Wednesday is a public holiday. So our next class will held on 19th April. Is that fine? Anyone? Yes? No?
So is there holiday tomorrow?
No, not tomorrow. It's day after tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow also it is holiday. Okay, so tomorrow and day after tomorrow both are holidays. If you just see your academic calendar, then you can see that it is a holiday. Your academic calendar is there on the website. So in one of the meetings, we were told that we should not conduct, even if the classes are being conducted online, we should not conduct it during the public holiday. So we will not have class. So if I just present it, so tomorrow and day after tomorrow both are holidays. Can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So this is your academic calendar for MTech, BTech, and MTech first semester. And if you see, then it is On 13th April and 14th April, these two are actually holidays. This so today is 12th. So tomorrow and after tomorrow is a holiday, and then next Wednesday is also a holiday actually. So next class we will have on 19th on Monday, and then we will have next class on 26th, and then 28th. Right. So after that you have this mid-semester exam. Then we will get a couple of classes, and then you will have end semester exam. So this is available at the IIT-RAM website. You just need to search academic calendar IIT-RAM. So there are 3 calendars running now. But after your first semester, first year, basically, you will come to the mainstream. Okay, so if you don't have anything else to discuss, then we will meet on Monday and see you next week. Bye.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.